Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unless, a Stand Together podcast. We are students of the group Stand Together, which focuses on destroying the stigma behind mental health. Today, we'll be talking about stigmatizing language and how it can negatively affect one's mental wellness. Before we get into that, let's meet our hosts.
Hi, I'm Kara. I'm going to be a junior at Shaler Area High School in the fall.
Hi, I'm Ella. I'm a rising freshman at the University of Pittsburgh.
Hi, I'm Riley. I am a rising junior at Shaler Area High School.
Hi, I'm Caitlin. I'm going to be a senior at Shaler Area High School.
Hi, I'm Brendan, and I'm a rising senior at Montour.
Due to the sensitive nature of the topics being discussed, we want to encourage you to keep your own wellness in mind. The exact topics discussed will be listed in the description. If at any time you're feeling overwhelmed while listening, please take a break and/or talk to an adult that you trust. Remember, we are not experts. Anything we say is simply a matter of opinion and personal experience.
Words matter. No one likes to be labeled. We must do our part to stop normalizing inappropriate language in conversations and in the media. We want to start a discussion rather than call out one's language. Awareness and education are the first step to change the way we talk about mental health and substance use disorders. Such words include
Disturbed,
Crazy.
mental,
Bipolar,
Psycho,
depressed,
Moody.
junkie,
addict,
druggy,
attention-seeking,
Dramatic.
paranoid,
insane,
ill.
freak.
Sick.
So these words aren't words that you can never use or words that you're supposed to swear off of. It's more of just these words, a lot of them in context, makes mental health seem like a very negative thing or a very violent subject when it's not. So person-first language is when an individual is a person before they are the disorder. An example of this is rather than saying a depressed person, it is a person with depression because they are themselves before they are their disorder. So if you were to use the word depressed, you could say, I feel depressed. That is a thing that people feel, and that is how to express your emotions. But if you were to say, yeah, I'm depressed, I have depression, when you're feeling sad and you don't genuinely have the disorder, it stigmatizes the way that depression is a mental illness and it's to be taken seriously rather than it's an emotion.
The terms sick and ill are okay when discussing physical health, but when it comes to mental health, it makes it seem like something you can catch.
I don't know if anyone else has ever heard of calling someone who did some terrible act sick.
Yeah.
That's different too, kinda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then sick as dude, that's sick. That's cool is a whole other thing.
Quick editor's note. The previous medical term, mental retardation, is no longer used. Rather, it is now considered an intellectual disability.
There's also other stigmatizing language such as the R word, which is a slur that a lot of people use in place of the word stupid or something akin to that when it's used to describe somebody who has an intellectual disability. And using it in other senses, such as using it in place of stupid, it creates the idea that somebody who does have those issues is entirely incapable.
The way it's used is often when, say your friend is doing something that might be stupid, and instead you use that word, it's like saying that their actions are akin to what someone with a mental disorder or disability would do, and that therefore that makes them lesser, or that is what causes their action, when in reality that is not the cause of people's actions. It's just what they decide to do, and using the word makes it seem like they're one and the same when they're not.
If I remember correctly, R word isn't even an accurate term anymore to describe that. They've moved on to, I don't remember what the phrase is or the word is, but because of the connotation that it had and everything, it has a new term now.
Yeah, it used to be a medical term.
Yeah.
And
people
now
would
it's not.
defend using it as, oh, it's a medical term and everything, and now it's not, and people still try to use that excuse sometimes.
So medically, yeah, instead of using the R word, medical professionals have rather opted to use the words intellectual disability because there has been a lot of stigma behind the R word, so they are using a more accurate term. And finally, we have the words commit versus complete when referring to suicide. So when you say one commits suicide, commit has the connotation most of the time of a criminal as one commits a crime. So instead, using the word complete kind of eliminates that idea or the connotation surrounding that word. So saying one completed suicide, or rather a term that would eliminate the word suicide entirely, would be they took their own life. That's also a perfectly fine alternative.
In episode 1, I mentioned that there is ADD and ADHD. I was informed afterwards that correct term is now ADHD and ADHD inattentive. That's another thing to be aware of. It's not, and there's not necessarily, at least from what I've seen, a stigma around that. That's just, they have changed the terminology. We're not perfect. We still make mistakes with this stuff too. Just like that. Like, sometimes you just don't know. But the thing is, take what you don't know, take what you learn, and apply it. Just like school, just like anything else. It doesn't just have to be about this, it's everything. But in this case, we're talking about stigmatizing language.
Language changes, we have to just make sure we are willing to change with it.
What I want to bring up kind of is like some of the stuff that I had highlighted. Not all of it, just like some of it of like the phrases and everything of how it's used, like things like the I'm so OCD about this. One big one, you're all such snowflakes.
I would like to say something regarding the OCD thing. Like, often it's the little things that, like, I feel I have a stick up my butt if I ask people not to use those terms, even as someone who does have OCD. It's invalidating, but it's also like, ooh, I don't feel like I have the power to tell you to stop.
And also, like, even as early as 4th grade, I would see people being like, oh, I'm so OCD, I put my pens in rainbow order on my desk. And it's like, that's not it. But that's what I thought it was for years until I actually had to look it up and be like, oh, that's not just it. It's like, I don't have OCD, but the things I saw and heard fed into that idea, and it made me think that's all it was. And that's why it's so harmful, because even if you aren't using the language, it gives other people a false idea. It's okay to explain how you feel, but it becomes an issue when you assign a diagnosis to it that you do not have.
I sat next to people in a certain class this past school year. I heard them at least maybe 2 times say, or like around like, oh, I feel so ADHD today. Like, I'm so ADHD today. And I can almost guarantee neither of these girls had ADHD. They're just like, oh, they're quirky. They're feeling a little hyper today. They're feeling crazy.
Using mental illnesses to describe the way you feel, yeah, it generalizes mental health to make it seem like I have these few things that I think are characteristic to this one mental illness, so I feel that way today. I feel like I have that mental illness today, when in fact it doesn't necessarily work like that. And mental illness is a diagnosable thing, and it's a long-term issue. Saying that because you feel distracted, or that because you feel hyperactive, that you feel ADHD, doesn't necessarily work. It stigmatizes ADHD because it makes it seem like it is a small issue and that it's a daily based thing, when it, in fact, as do most mental illnesses, affect people every day in a lot of ways.
I like, because of that kind of connotation with it, I never, like, it wasn't until, and I think I said this in the first episode, that I didn't know until like a year ago, like more mental health and like mood and everything side of ADHD. I genuinely thought it was just your brain works on overdrive, basically. I didn't know about things like executive dysfunction and projection sensitive dysphoria and that kind of stuff. I had no idea. And I didn't learn that from a therapist, a psychologist, my parents' school. I learned it from Tumblr.
So stigma describes the negative perceptions and stereotypes associated with mental and substance abuse disorders in our society. Stigma is also an acronym.
Define what stigma looks like.
So S stands for stereotypes, T stands for teasing, I stands for inappropriate language, G stands for the G in ignorance, M stands for myths, and A stands for attitude. We like to say that stigma causes shame, shame causes silence, and silence hurts us all.
Actually, a few months ago, it was actually about a week or two before the world shut down. I, along with other students from my school's branch, I guess, of Stand Together, held a professional development for teachers and talked to the teachers for about 2 hours on various things relating to like mental health and students and everything. And I worked in a group on stigmatizing language. And while we did this, we went over a bunch of examples and like things we had heard other students say, things that we had heard teachers say, and like what's the issue with saying some of that stuff. Well, one teacher noted that they didn't realize when they said that it could be harmful. Cut to a few days later, I'm in a club with some friends and a few people who were in Stand Together, and one of them mentions how they noticed this teacher in their class. If they said something that would be stigmatizing, caught themselves, went back and corrected themselves. And so it's really nice to see someone like that doing that, like taking what they learned and applying it. I think specifically it was about like OCD or something.
We all use sometimes stigmatizing language without realizing it. It's something that's pretty ingrained in our society, but the fact that your teacher caught themselves and fixed what they were saying is what matters. What matters is that we are taking notice of what we're saying, because language really can hurt people, and it matters a lot what you say to somebody or just in general.
In fact, I wanted to say, a lot of the time we hear the phrase, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." That is not true. Yeah, physical things can harm you, potentially cause death, but that's completely different than living with having someone had said this thing to you and then it's in the back of your brain at all times. Like someone says something to you, always feel like, oh, I can't do this anymore because someone said something about it and now I'm super self-conscious about it.
But I find myself catching myself whenever we're even recording these podcasts. Like for the first one, when I was talking about my own personal mental health journey, I guess, I said that it was all mental, which is not what I meant, but it came across as being stigmatizing when really I just wanted to say it was all like caused by my brain, but I slipped up very easily because it's just so ingrained.
I just wanted to say that a lot of the times whenever I catch myself using stigmatizing language, it's on Twitter. And so sometimes if it's not to your face, a lot of people will say worse things because you're not face to face. So sometimes I make sure that what I'm saying is appropriate for the situation so that people don't take it harmfully. And always making sure to put a disclaimer before something that could negatively affect someone is something that I've worked on a lot recently. So even some things such as like food or loud noises can negatively affect someone. And it doesn't take long to just put a quick disclaimer and copy your tweet. And I feel like that's something everyone should look for or try to do. Just the smaller things really can have a really big difference if you just put the effort into it.
That's something like triggered, became like got its own stigma around that was like 2016 like somewhere between 2016 and 2018, where it became the meme with like, oh, feminism and triggered and everything, and it's like that kind of ruined that when people use like something triggers your anxiety, depression, OCD, etc. It's something that is very sad. It's the same thing with like there became a stigma of sorts around things like fidget spinners and fidget toys in general, but specifically fidget spinners back in 2017 when they were all the rage and they got banned in so many schools when kids who have like autism or ADHD, that's who they're made for more. Like they're made for students, kids, even adults who always need to be doing something. Like I always feel the need to be doing something with my hands. Now, I never used a fidget spinner like in that time or anything. Still don't. It's just never really been my thing. It caused a lot of schools to ban that kind of stuff because it became like mainstream and people were abusing them.
It was the fact that kids were using them as toys rather than tools, and
Yes.
it kind of took away the meaning behind them. Fidget toys were meant for kids to focus and to be able to subtly be able to like be restless, but they were taken and they were used as toys and they were distracting kids from class, so they were taken out of schools.
One correction we would like to make is that they are referred to as fidgets, not fidget toys, as that term frames them as something for entertainment rather than assisting focus.
So I still find myself using like crackhead a lot. I think that's one that a lot of us started using, like somebody acting, funny, or somebody doing something that is cool, and calling them a crackhead when crack is an actual drug. Isn't somebody acting quirky or somebody acting abnormal and saying that, or somebody doing something risky and saying that they are a crackhead because they're doing that thing. It's erasing the fact that somebody who is actually addicted to crack, that they're usually called crackheads. And so saying that, a drug addict is akin to somebody acting quirky is also stigmatizing.
Rather than saying someone is a crackhead, say they are someone with a substance use disorder.
We are also working on our awareness and on changing our language. It doesn't change overnight. If we all hold each other accountable, we can collectively shift our language for the better.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Unless, a student discussion on mental health. We would like to conclude with a quote from Dr. Seuss's The Lorax. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Our social media will be in the description, along with mental health resources and hotlines. Join us in our next episode as we discuss eating disorders and the impact of social media on body image.